Over 4.5 billion years ago, long before us, long before life, and long before the oceans, a young planet was created, born from the swirling gases and dust formed from the early solar system, ready to evolve into something greater. This is the story of Earth's creation. Just after Earth was created, the surface was an ocean, not of water, but magma, with active volcanoes everywhere the eye could see. This age was known as the Hadean Eon. During this time, scientists hypothesized that a Mars-sized planet called Theia collided with the early Earth. The rocks and dust released from the explosion would form one of the most important objects in the night sky, the Moon. Our Moon is the product of a planetary collision. Instead of complete annihilation, it managed to create something beautiful. But down in the surface, Earth was still a fiery mess, waiting for an event to change everything. As we move across the Hadean Eon, icy comets from the Kuiper Belt fell in abundance, delivering precious water to Earth's surface. However, this was not the only way water was created. It may have been formed through volcanic eruptions. As the volcanoes erupted, they would release gases trapped inside the Earth. One of these gases is water vapor. As the Earth cooled, the vapor condensed and fell down as rain, filling the lower lands and creating the first oceans. After around 500 million years, scientists believe that there was an event called the Late Heavy Bombardment, which saw the impact of an unusually high number of asteroids and comets, delivering more water and organic molecules. After the chaotic fires of the Hadean Eon, Earth's temperature begins to cool and stabilize. At this point, Earth's oceans are significantly larger than before, while the continents start to emerge as molten magma begins to solidify. The atmosphere glowed with an orange haze being filled with nitrogen, methane, and carbon dioxide, lacking free-floating oxygen that we see in our atmosphere today. Although harsh and cruel to the creatures of today, these conditions helped set the stage for the first organisms to populate the empty planet. It was during this time, known as the Archean Eon, that life started to emerge, but not in the form of the giants of today, but as single-celled organisms that could do nothing but evolve. These creatures were the pioneers, facing a new challenge that many could not overcome. These creatures thrived in the oceans, feeding off the minerals and chemical energy they provided. Some formed structures called stromatolites, a layered structure formed by colonies of cyanobacteria. Scientists use the fossils of these structures to predict how life survived back in this time period. As these organisms evolved, they developed a subtle yet incredible ability that is used by plants and other organisms today. This ability was photosynthesis. It would completely change the way organisms were able to interact with the environment. Instead of relying on chemicals for energy, they were now able to create their own from the sun. By the end of the Archean Eon, the Earth changed from its orange haze to the blue skies we see today, and oxygen started to seep its way into the fragile environment of the early planet, creating the grounds for the next chapter of our planet. After the developments of the Archean Eon, we transitioned towards life, starting with the Proterozoic Eon. During this age, the Earth slowly started to accumulate oxygen in its atmosphere due to photosynthesis producing oxygen as a waste product. At first, it reacted with the minerals in the ocean, but it slowly spilled into the air, becoming a major milestone for Earth. Life in this time slowly became more and more complex. Around 2 billion years ago, we started to see the first eukaryotic organisms. These organisms were the first to have a nucleus inside of them. With the emergence of the eukaryotic cell, we also saw the rise of multicellular organisms. One of the first was called Gryponia, a eukaryotic alga that might have been a colony of individual organisms or one large multicellular organism. Nonetheless, these organisms created the soil for the organisms that would succeed them. In addition to the change in organisms, the continents changed drastically. In this time period, the first ever supercontinents formed, with the most notable being Columbia, the first known supercontinent, and Rodinia, one of the largest supercontinents ever known. But supercontinents don't last forever. As Rodinia broke apart almost 750 million years ago, it disrupted ocean currents and atmospheric circulation. The combination of these disruptions plunged the Earth into a deep freeze known as a snowball Earth. Organisms that did not adapt fast enough perished, causing only the best to survive on to live. This life managed to cling on with heat vents in the deep ocean and pockets of open water. On the surface, the situation was dire. The oceans and continents were all frozen in a layer of ice ranging from a few hundred meters thick to a record-breaking 2 kilometers thick. This was much more deadly than what the Ice Age could ever bring. But as time passed, the effects of the snowball Earth slowly waned. As volcanic activity sprang back up and thawed the Earth, the planet breathed a sigh of relief. And with the end of the snowball Earth, and with it the Proterozoic Eon, life continued to evolve into something even greater. Fast forward almost 100 million years, and we have reached the Cambrian period, the first period of the Paleozoic era and the Phanerozoic Eon. This was probably the most important step in life. At this time, life started to evolve exponentially. Known as the Cambrian explosion, Earth finally saw the rise of complex organisms. Although in a different form, they were the descendants for those who came later on, including us. Notable organisms include the Anomalocaris, a fearsome predator and the descendant of modern-day crabs and bugs; the Pikaia, a worm-like creature that was the descendant of all animals with a backbone; and green algae, the descendant of all modern-day plants. With the rise of a lot of strange creatures that used an exoskeleton, another group began to take a different path using a backbone and evolving into a creature that fills the oceans of today. These early organisms were the descendants of fish and all those related. The early fish were very similar to the fish of today, but lacked some key features that they would slowly develop. One of those is the jaw. Believe it or not, these fish could only feed themselves by filtering or sucking in small particles, kind of like the whales of today. Another feature they lacked were scales or armor. These organisms had soft bodies, with scales developing later on. With the rise of the backboned fish, almost all the other animals would inherit the backbone and the jaw. As the complex organisms rose to power, we moved on to the Ordovician period, from 485 to 444 million years ago. This period saw the domination of marine life and the arrival of the early coral reefs. Groups like the trilobites and the brachiopods roamed the oceans at this time. But with the rise of these creatures, it was inevitable for them to disappear. With a combination of global cooling and sea levels dropping due to glaciation, the Ordovician-Silurian mass extinction occurred. This was the first of the Big Five mass extinction events. The effects were disastrous to the planet. Nearly 85% of all marine species went extinct, but it would not be the end of life. With the extinction event wiping out almost all of the major species, it allowed two new factions to grow and marked the beginning of the Silurian period. Thriving in the rich soil right next to the land, these organisms would be the descendants of the plants of today. Although not the plants you would think of, like grasses or trees which will start springing up millions of years later, the moss and liverworts set the stage for all those to come. The second faction that would inhabit the land areas were arthropods. They would dwell upon the land as there were no other animals to challenge them. Following the rise of the land creatures, there was also significant developments in aquatic life, especially in fish. This new age, called the Devonian period, would mark the golden age of fish and their relatives. The fish in this era evolved tremendously, seeing the rise of species such as the Cladocelaci filary, a mako-looking shark that inhabited the oceans of the Devonian era. One of the most popular of the Devonian period was the Dunkelestius, which was an armored, jawed fish that inhabited and became the top predator of the marine ecosystems in this time. With many species, the Earth had lots of biodiversity, different types of species that would evolve into the animals we see now. But with the success of the fish, their dominance wouldn't last forever. In the late Devonian, the globe started to cool. Oxygen started to decrease, and the sea levels fluctuated, possibly due to volcanic activity or asteroid impacts. These effects contributed to the late Devonian mass extinction, the second of the Big Five mass extinctions. Concluding the Devonian period, the mass extinction helped the planet grow further in evolution and brought rise to the organisms that are the base of all ecosystems, the plants. In the Carboniferous period, the planet rapidly started to heat up after the cooling of the mass extinction. In addition to the heat, the planet also started to form the supercontinent Pangaea, the most famous supercontinent known and the largest even to our time. On the surface, plants started to evolve rapidly. Instead of the moss and algae that came before it, complex plants such as giant ferns and conifers roamed the surface. On the animal side, the first reptiles evolved from the amphibians that came before them. The reptiles would soon grow into a plethora of different species that would take the crown for hundreds of millions of years. Around the same time, a sister group of reptiles called the synapsids, the early ancestors of all mammals, would develop. By the end of the Carboniferous, plants started to take the form of plants now, and animals were all across the land. These factors would help open the gates to the next period of Earth, the Permian. With the start of the Permian, three big changes started to make their way across the planet. The first of which is the rise of synapsids such as the Dimetrodon, commonly mistaken as a dinosaur. This predator had a tall spine to help regulate heat exchange in its body. The second big change is the formation of the supercontinent Pangaea, the most famous supercontinent known and the largest even to our time. The third change is the extreme climates that developed due to the formation of Pangaea. In the interior of the continent, it was incredibly dry, with vast deserts occupying the land. But as the Permian progressed, intense volcanic activity from the Siberian traps released huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the air, causing the Earth and its oceans to warm. This event became known as the Great Dying, the third of the Big Five mass extinction events. The effects were disastrous to the planet. Almost 95% of all species went extinct, and of that figure, 75% of terrestrial species were erased from the surface of the Earth. Like in the past, life still found its way through the ashes. With the Great Dying marking the end of the Permian, it let a new faction rise and eventually inhabit all of the Earth. This species was known as the dinosaurs, the most infamous extinct animals to ever live. We have now traveled to the Triassic period, the first period of the Mesozoic era and the start of the dinosaur age. But these creatures wouldn't develop until the middle of the Triassic. At the start, the first creatures in this time were the survivors of the last mass extinction. Known as archosaurs, these animals were the rulers of the Triassic, claiming almost all parts of Pangaea as their home. Species like the Protozoocus, a crocodile-like predator, had to adapt to the harsh, dry conditions of the time. Mentioned earlier, Pangaea's desert was vast and hot, making the coast incredibly valuable for the life forms on land. With the emergence of the archosaurs, the planet would enter a new dynasty of creatures that would lead the Earth, starting from the Middle Triassic. Meet Nyasasaurus, the earliest known dinosaur. This creature had all the features of the dinosaurs we would see in movies. Significant features included its bipedal stance and the long tail, which helps it move across the land without falling. As time flowed, the dinosaurs would slowly evolve into many different species, all with different attributes that would aid them in different niches. Although these creatures were not the top predators, they slowly made a name for themselves. As with all of the great eras, a significant disaster occurs. With the breakup of Pangaea, massive volcanic eruptions in the central Atlantic magmatic province caused huge amounts of carbon dioxide and methane were released into the atmosphere, creating a greenhouse effect that would cause a rapid increase in temperature across a short period of time. Known as the Triassic-Jurassic mass extinction event and the fourth of the Big Five mass extinction events, it led to the loss of almost 80% of all creatures. Across the land and sea, animals died due to the intense heat radiating across the world. But like all of the events before it, life prevailed. With the Triassic-Jurassic mass extinction marking the end of the Triassic period, it would be time for the Earth to enter the height of the dinosaurs' power. In the Jurassic period, there would be many significant changes that would affect all the life forms on the planet. One was the breakup of Pangaea, which caused species on one side of the continent to become separated from the other, which became known as Laurasia and Gondwana. Another significant change was the shift from the dry and desert-like landscape to more of a tropical and humid environment due to the creation of more coastlines and shallow oceans after the breakup of Pangaea. The most significant change was the animals. In this time period, the dinosaurs and other creatures flourished in a landscape ideal for their survival. On the land, sauropods like the Brachiosaurus towered over the trees, and carnivores such as the Allosaurus developed sharp claws and teeth to hunt down its prey. In the ocean, giant marine reptiles dominated the environment. Long-necked plesiosaurs glided through the water with their large flippers, and dolphin-looking ichthyosaurs soared through the water with their streamlined shape. The Jurassic was certainly the golden age for all reptiles, not just the dinosaurs. Following the Jurassic, the Cretaceous would arrive, lasting from 143 to 66 million years ago. At this time, the dinosaurs have reached their highest diversity. The mighty T-Rex roamed the land, hunting prey all around, and the amphibious Spinosaurus would prove a mighty challenge for fish alike. In the sky, pterosaurs would roam about, with some reaching the lengths of planes. Large marine creatures like the Mosasaurus would dominate the seas with its powerful bite and large fins. But other than the creatures, the plants flourished as well. In the Cretaceous, plants were finally able to develop the ability to flower, allowing the landscape to be filled with a beautiful arrangement of colors. But all of this doesn't last. You probably already know the story. Around 66 million years ago, an asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula. Out of nowhere, this ancient world was obliterated. But the actual impact was not the reason why they went extinct. Scientists have two leading causes for how the dinosaurs went extinct after this. The first of which was the release of huge amounts of dust and aerosols, blocking the sunlight and causing many animals to die from starvation. The second cause was the eruption of the Deccan Traps in India, which may have weakened populations before the impact. Even though this world turned into a desolate wasteland, survivors emerged from the ashes and will continue life and start the rise of a new group of animals, the mammals. With the start of the Cenozoic period, the climate was largely similar to what it was in the late Cretaceous. As the continent split apart, it changed how the ocean currents spread heat across the land. With the tectonic movement, the Earth slowly started to cool, forming thick ice sheets that would cover the poles and eventually start the first ice age. With the start of the Ice Age, it would see mammals adapting to its conditions. Animals such as the woolly mammoth wore a thick coat of fur that would insulate their bodies from the harsh, icy conditions. In the sea, mammals such as the Basilosaurus would use thick blubber to keep in heat and prevent the cold water from hurting them. With the start of the Age of Mammals, another creature would eventually dwarf the developments of all that would come before. Meet the modern-day human. Appearing around the late Pleistocene, around 2.5 million years ago, the earliest humans were problem solvers and thinkers who would solve problems instead of relying on pure instinct. Major examples include the trapping and killing of mammoths in tar pits and the creation of tools to use for hunting. As we move toward our modern age, humans have started to develop more and more of their brains instead of other animals which have focused on physical abilities. These qualities are what make us human. From the Stone Age to the Industrial Revolution, we have achieved much more than nature could do in the same amount of time. And all of that brings you to this moment. So when you look at the trees, birds, and people outside, just remember the billions of years that were behind it all. Thank you for listening to the entire evolution of our planet, from the first cells to us.